Greetings. Today is 3/31/2020, which is on the Almighty's calendar, I believe to be the 14th day, which is Passover day 1 of the first month of the first year of the first week, and we just entered into the 121st Jubilee, and it's also the 71st year of the end time generation, and the 6,000th year since the transformation of Adam and Eve in Eden. And I get that via the Revelation 12 and Genesis 3 signs, which are connected, where you have the woman clothed with the sun, the moon at her feet, crown of 12 stars, which is the woman representing the body, Leo representing the lion of the tribe of Judah, the Messiah. Leo has 9 stars, but then there were 3 planets. And in 3974 BC to 3973 BC, the 3 planets were Mercury, Mars, and Venus. And then Jupiter, the king planet, was in the womb. I believe the term that when it stays there and looks like it's staying still, but it really isn't, it's called retrograde. Not 100% on that term, but it means it looks like it's staying in one place. And so Jupiter remained in the womb of Virgo for 9 months and then was birthed out. That occurred in 3974 to 3973 BC, and then it occurred in 2016 to 2017 AD. And the only difference in 2017 is that it was Mercury, Mars, and Venus. In 3973 BC, it was Saturn, Mercury, and Venus. But both times, in both instances, Jupiter, the king planet, remained in the womb 9 months and then was birthed, which only occurs 2 times in all of history, which makes the celestial signs so unique. And then the fact that it was prophesied to us 2,000 years in advance makes it even more unique. With that said, the birth of evil occurred on the 17th day of the second month of 3973 BC, because that's when the antichrist, Azazel, Apollyon, he decided to act upon his jealousy. So he may have had thoughts prior to this, but he did not act upon it until this day, which is the same day that Noah entered the ark. And I believe they are connected. And this is when the Antichrist was stripped of his glory, because he was a guardian angel. He was stripped in his glory and put into a body of flesh, which I showed you in past videos. It looks like a centaur. And same thing with Adam and Eve. For the 7 years that they were in the garden, they were in a redeemed type of a body, probably similar to the angels, probably similar to the ones that we will have. But then once they sinned, they were put into flesh once again. So that's where I get the start of the Jubilee count, because you subtract 7 years from this time when evil was birthed, and you get 3980 BC. Well, we just began the 6,000th year on would have been March 18th, I think, would have been the first day of the first month. So that's how I get that. Now, something I wanted to go over, because the Jubilee count and the prophecy of weeks, they are not, they're not the same exact days or years. They are, I guess, about 7 years apart, 6 or 7 years apart, somewhere in there. And the reason being is because it's acting like gears. If two gears try to hit at the same time, they mash each other, bust each other up. But when they're offset, that's how they spin properly. And that's what's going on here with the Jubilee count versus the weeks count. Okay, and the reason being is because they're different. Alright? The Jubilee count began with the transformation of Adam from a caveman into made in the image of the Almighty, which occurred in 3980 BC in Eden. And I believe Eden is in the core of the earth. We went over that in past videos. And however, the weeks count is tied to when the fallen ones were bound. Okay? Because a lot of the prophecies in Scripture refer to when they are released. And a lot of people don't understand that. Actually, almost everybody doesn't understand that. But here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is where it all began. Like I said, Enoch was the original prophet, so anybody who acts like the book of Enoch is insignificant, they don't have a grasp of what the Messiah is trying to tell us, what the Almighty is trying to tell us, because Enoch is the original prophet. He spoke directly to the Almighty and then testified to us. And basically most other prophecies all throughout Scripture are just confirming what the Almighty and the angels told Enoch. So anyway, here is, because what occurred was, and interestingly, it didn't even seem like the Almighty was that mad with the fallen ones until their children started eating the humans. Actually, most of them were cavemen at that time, but nonetheless. So, Azazel, Apollyon, the antichrist, was the one who deceived Adam and Eve. Then some time went by, and like we spoke about in past videos, I believe, that he met up with the seed of Cain, and they started building an empire by enslaving the cavemen. And then I believe that the Almighty sent down 200 guardian angels to protect the seed of Seth, because he was just basically, in comparison to their empire, he was just a few people and a family, like nomads. Right? So I believe the Almighty sent down 200 guardian angels to protect Seth. Now, Azazel was more than likely probably the original leader of the guardian angels, but once he got removed of the glory and put into flesh, he was no longer to ascend into New Jerusalem. So now the Almighty had to make a new leader, which I believe is that he promoted Semyaza. And I don't believe that these are their actual names. They're probably just descriptions of them. I don't know what their names are, but anyway. So now Semyaza is the leader of the guardian angels, and the Almighty sends them down, or Michael, whoever, sends them down to protect Seth and his family. But what happens is the 200 who are led by him now, they end up rebelling too. So then they get stripped of their glory and put into flesh. Or I personally believe that they actually asked for it. That's what the oath that they made, I believe, is actually them asking to be put in the flesh so they can mingle with the women. So what they didn't realize is that their offspring would turn out to be bloodthirsty maniacs. And they started killing everything. And when they were killing the humans and eating them, it says that the blood of the humans cried up to the gates of heaven. And that's when Michael went to the Almighty and asked him what they should do. And then that's when the Almighty pronounced judgment. And then he tells Raphael to bind Azazel by himself, casts him into the abyss until the great day of judgment. Okay, he shall remain there until the great day of judgment. Then he tells Gabriel to give a sword to the reprobates, the children of fornication, which are the giants, that they should kill each other. So Gabriel gives them a sword, and the giants kill each other, while the 200 have to watch. And then he tells Michael to bind the 200 and cast them into the abyss. And now it says that they will be bound for 70 generations underneath the earth, which is the abyss, until the day of judgment, which is the consummation, the completion of their judgment. And then once it's completed, it'll be forever. Okay, so they're bound for 70 generations under the earth in the abyss, which is basically somewhere by the lava. And then they're released for the great day of judgment. And then it's consummated, which is it's completed after the week. And then they're cast into the burning fire, and that will be forever. Okay, but my point in saying all this is because when Daniel's praying, he prays about the completion of the desolations. Now, in his mind, he's talking about when Jeremiah the prophet said that after the 70 years, the Israelites' captivity would be freed. Okay. Was it the Israelites or was it just the Judah? I'm not sure if it was all of Israel or just Judah at that time. But anyway. So Daniel, in his mind, wanted to know about the 70 years. However, the big clue here is that he's talking about the completion of the desolations. And now this is a perfect example of how a prayer isn't answered exactly how you want it to be answered. Because when Gabriel brings the prophecy in response to Daniel's prayer, he's speaking the prophecy about the completion of the desolations. Because the desolations were not completed back in when the Messiah was born. Okay? Like people try to say. That was just their captivity ended. The desolations were not completed. The desolations are not completed until after the Antichrist and his minions trample Jerusalem for the week. Okay? I know it says 42 months, but that 42 months only pertains to when part of the body of the Messiah is still here. Okay? Because then they have another 3 years where they are all by themselves, which is the beast of the earth. The 42 months pertains to the beast of the sea when they first start. And there's parts of the body are still here. They haven't been raptured yet. You got the 144,000 and then the people that they win during that time. But anyway, so the 70 weeks prophecy is about the final 70 weeks of this 70 generations, because it pertains to this. The 70 weeks prophecy is linked to this. The completion of the desolations, the final consummation, the great day of judgment, the great day, okay? Because when at the cross, transgression was not finished. As you can see, when you look around, people are transgressing the law all over the place, even a majority of Christianity. Sin was not ended. He took away the sin of the world, but there's the sin from heaven. And plus, we all still sin. So sin was not ended. It was just the sin of the world was taken away. But the sin of heaven and sin in general still has to be dealt with. And everlasting righteousness was not brought in yet. See, all this happens after the Messiah comes down for the war of the great day, completely destroys the enemy, binds them, and tosses them into the everlasting fire, which is basically the magma in the down by the center of the earth. Okay, that's what all this is about. The 70 weeks, and it uses weeks instead of generations because it explains a few other things here. That's why he uses weeks, because he talks about when Jerusalem gets restored after the 6-day war. And it also talks about when the anointed ruler comes onto the scene, the world scene, which is after the 69th week. So that's why he had to use weeks instead of generations, because it's a little more precise. But anyway, basically the 70 weeks means the final 7 generations of this 70 generations of them being bound. And then we see them get released in Revelation 9. Okay, that's when these entities get released. Revelation 9. Okay, so I just wanted to clear that up before I start with the timeline here, because I left off basically around the birth of the Messiah. So then approximately around 1536 is when the 70 weeks prophecy, the count began. And that was with Suleiman, when he called for the Jews to come back to Jerusalem, and he started to restore actually Jerusalem. All right. Both of them occurred in around 1536. That's when the 70-week prophecy, the count, begins. Okay? Now, we come to (9/23/2017) is when the revelation sign occurred. And this is the spiritual conception of the 144,000. So there will be two births 9 years after this. The one birth will be the main birth, which is when New Jerusalem is birthed into our near space, right around where the moon is. Okay? Maybe even a little closer. And also, it's when the 144,000 are birthed, when they come back to Earth 9 years after this date. Okay? Then we have the start of the 70th week, 3/20/2019. And this would be when Noah, because the days of Noah are the days of remembrance, and the first day of remembrance is the 10th day of the first month. So after the 70th week began, the start of the days of Noah began with the command to build the ark, meaning the time to establish whether you're part of the wise virgins, the foolish virgins, or harlot Christianity is determined within this final year. Okay? And the anointed ruler is the end time Elijah, which is POTUS Trump from Ephraim, the camp of Ephraim. And we see in that Judah is the bow and Ephraim is the arrows. We see that in, I believe it's Zechariah, which would coincide with with Daniel, when Gabriel says that it's only him and Judah, or excuse me, it's only him and Michael that are the ones standing real firm against the enemy. Which I believe basically means is that America, which is the camp of Ephraim, is the ones that do the most of, manifest the most bringing about of the justice for the 7 years of the 70th week. Okay, because if you've seen my other videos, that I believe that the enemy had worldwide control, but now they're being pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and they're eventually going to be pushed back until they only have jurisdiction over the Middle East, and that's the authority that they're given, that jurisdiction, which is basically the original authority that they had at the separation of the nations, when the Almighty put them as princes, like guardian angels over the nations. But they, like we see when Gog, Satan, when he got kicked out of Eden, he got kicked out of Eden because he was enjoying violence and blood and death too much, which is, they started conquest. When you see, they were supposed to remain within their boundaries, the sacred boundaries, and Canaan was the first to violate it, and then it just became a big free-for-all of trying to conquer. And at the fall of tears, when Satan got kicked out of Eden and put into flesh, but prior to that, he was enjoying making the people that he was prince over to do conquest. And he started in Magog and spread out, which was, Magog would be modern day Turkey, and he spread out and went as far south as at least here in Sidon, but that was basically the Phoenicians, so he actually had control of all the Mediterranean too. But anyway, they had control of the whole earth via the central banks prior, and they basically weren't challenged prior to the election of President Trump, which is the end-time Elijah. Now he's standing up to them, and he's going to push them back. And then once the Messiah full out begins his conquest after the first seal, then they're really going to get pushed back into the Middle East, which was their original jurisdiction. And that's the authority that they're given. But it's actually a demotion because they did have control of the whole earth. Okay? So during this time here, and another thing I want to emphasize is that this is, the Ephraim and Judah is in the physical, but in the spiritual, the arrows are actually the three other angels of the presence of the altar in New Jerusalem. And the bow is Michael. Okay, we went over that many times before, but anyway. And they are already shot out prior to the first seal being open, meaning the groundwork is being laid, kind of like an army before a war. They don't just go in, they send in recon, special operations, forward operating post. They send all that in first before they actually conduct the big mission. And that's what's occurring now. That the groundwork is being laid for the big ones to hit. And then this year, like I said, it's the year between the building of the ark and when he enters the ark. And it's the time, it says that Noah obeyed all that the Almighty commanded, meaning he was doing the will of the Almighty. And that's how we prove what we are, whether we're wise virgins, foolish virgins, or harlot Christians. Will depend upon our obedience during this year is when the main observation is taking place. And then I believe I just did a video 2 days ago or a day ago, whenever it was, about the first rapture, which I really believe should happen from today is the main high watch, but all the way until 5:15, which would be when the final generation turns 72. I believe it has to occur before the final generation turns 72, but it really should occur today, in all honesty. Going by the rehearsals in Scripture. And I just did a video on that 2 days ago. And then we have the trial, the testing, the temptation, which is the 6 years until the... So this is the first rapture. Then we have the trial, the testing, the temptation, which is 6 years until the second rapture, which is the seventh seal. Okay. So the first rapture is of the wise virgins, the church of Philadelphia, the elders, and they enter the open door that goes to New Jerusalem. So there's an open door in heaven, and it goes to New Jerusalem, which is, I believe, is in the center, the core of the sun currently. And this is the Passover pilgrimage. It's what begins the sorrows. It's what starts the sorrows. It starts the birth pains. And it's the sudden destruction. And interestingly, when I've been watching the President Trump coronavirus task force briefings, he's been saying the amount of nations that have had deaths, and I think like 2 days ago it was up to like 152, and then I was thinking about 153, because in John 21, when it talks about the Messiah telling them to throw the net, and the sudden destruction comes upon them like a snare, a trap, and a net traps fish, and the number of the fish was 153, and it says that they were big fish. So I don't know, that might have something to do with that if he announces today that there's 153. We'll see what happens, but anyway. Then the solar eclipses make a Tav over America, which is the Passover symbol. And the first one, I think, was in, what was it? 2017, and then the second one is in 2024. And they make a Tav over America, which is the Passover symbol. Okay. Now, the seventh seal should occur somewhere around summertime 2026, and this will begin the 1290 and the 1335. That'll begin the removal of the daily sacrifice, which is believers, true believers. That'll begin the 1290 count and the 1335 count. Okay, and this is the second rapture, those that remain, and the dead in Christ gathered into the clouds, because at the sixth seal, New Jerusalem comes through a wormhole to near space. So New Jerusalem is here after the sixth seal, which is Revelation 6:14. That's the wormhole opening, and then the following scriptures, they see the Almighty. So you can't see the Almighty if he's not here. But because New Jerusalem comes here through a wormhole, at Revelation 6:14, they see him because New Jerusalem's here. And it's almost the size of the moon. That's why every eye sees him. And it's on top of the clouds, meaning it's right above the clouds, which is near space. Okay? And that's why these only have to be gathered into the clouds. They don't have to go through a wormhole, a portal, which is the open door in heaven, like the wise virgins do. They don't have to do that because New Jerusalem's here. So they only have to be gathered in the clouds and then taken in. And this is the last trump war preparation. The last trump is a war preparation, meaning the Messiah is sounding the last trump for the angels to go out and gather his people, secure them into New Jerusalem before conducting the war in heaven, which is the war in space. Okay? And this is the Pentecost pilgrimage. And like I said, New Jerusalem's here. Then 30 days later is the start of the 1260, which is the birth of the 144,000. They're sent back to earth. And this is when the war in space happens. And the war in space, I believe, is New Jerusalem blasts the moon to smithereens because Gog, Satan, and his minions have their base. They mirrored their base after Eden and New Jerusalem, and they made it in the core of the moon. And the core of the moon is solid, they believe, just like the core of the earth and the core of the sun. So I'm guessing that they did it exactly the same as Eden. And they probably hollowed out the middle of the core and have their base in there, their headquarters. And New Jerusalem in the war in space blasts the moon to smithereens. The fallout hits, it would scatter. So the side of the moon that scatters towards Earth is going to hit the one side of the Earth, which will be the Americas. Will be facing that when it comes down. 1/3 of the Earth is the Americas, and it completely obliterates North, South, and Central America. The first trumpet, which is the fallout from the war in space. Okay. Then the second trumpet hits the sea. It's a burning mountain they call wormwood. All right, and so it would be the core of the moon with the molten lava still on it, falling towards Earth. Well, I'm sure the Almighty probably uses his energy to throw it to Earth, because otherwise it might have just hovered in the near space. But the term is used thrown down, so he uses his energy to throw it towards Earth, and because Earth rotates, instead of hitting the Americas, it hits the Pacific and completely annihilates everything in the Pacific, everything that's touching it. And the approximate diameter of the core of the moon is 200 miles, so it's big. It might not be that big, 200 miles, which would be like Rhode Island hitting the Pacific. All right, and this is what I say when I said in past videos that people don't comprehend the destruction that is occurring when they try to say that there's going to be internet or artificial intelligence or whatever. No. Humans, or when they try to say that Gog is Russia or Turkey or something like that. No. Humans are barely going to be able to find a piece of bread, let alone, decide to mobilize an army for war against little old Israel. All right. This has nothing to do with humans at this point. Humans get conquered with ease. Right? So the 1260 begins with the Feast of Trumpets in 2026. Like I said, the first trumpet fallout from New Jerusalem blasting the moon to smithereens. It hits North, South, and Central America, completely obliterates it. Then as we rotate, when the headquarters of Gog, which is the devil, and his minions, when that is thrown to the earth, it hits the Pacific, because we're rotating. Pacific completely annihilates everything touching the Pacific. Now at this point in time, there's only a few spots on Earth left that's habitable. Everything else, North, South, and Central America, everything's dead. Everything. Pacific and all that it touches, everything's dead. Everything. Okay. This begins the 1260, the start of the 1260, and the 144,000, they are raptured up at the Day of Redemption, which is the Pentecost pilgrimage. When they are in New Jerusalem, they are there for 30 days, okay, because they're raptured up at the 1290, the 1335. So they're there for 30 days, and then they get sent back, which is Revelation 8:5, is when they get sent back. Now, when they're in New Jerusalem for that 30 days, that's when they're getting trained, sealed, given authority, etc., told what they got to do, and then they're sent back. Now, when they get sent back, where they land will be Bashan, which is like northeast of Israel. And when they land, it causes a great earthquake. And it's that great earthquake that destroys Damascus, not war. Okay? And that great earthquake is also the earthquake that breaks open the abyss, which is in Syria also. I showed you guys in the past where the gateway to the abyss is for Apollyon. Al-Safa is what it's called. And when that breaks open, Apollyon and 90% of the demons come out with him, and they are in some type of flesh form, which are these centaurs. Alright? And they come out, and they are ready to destroy, because they've been locked up for 4,900 years. Okay? Now, at the same time, Satan, which is Gog, and his minions, the 10 horns, don't know if it's only 10 or if it's 100 or if it's 1,000, they're thrown to the earth. They have some kind of army with them. They meet up with Apollyon and his minions. So Satan and his minions, which is Gog, Apollyon and his minions, they meet up. They make an alliance. This is the covenant of Daniel 9. It's nothing to do with peace. It's an alliance between Gog and Apollyon. Apollyon is larger. If you see my past videos, he looks like he's about 20 feet tall, where Satan and his minions are only about 10 feet tall. So this is why in Daniel 7 it says that the little horn that comes up from among them is much more stout. Okay? Because he's bigger. But anyway, the alliance is between Apollyon and Satan, Gog. Has nothing to do with peace or humans. Okay? And after that, they immediately head for Jerusalem and conquer it with ease. They conquer everything with ease. This is the beginning of the conquest of humanity. This is the start of the 42 months. And Apollyon's the 8th head, because the seven other heads, they're still locked up in the abyss. They don't get released until 5 months after the first trumpet, the start. So Apollyon, the 8th head, and the 10 horns, the rebel angels who rebelled around the time of Tyr with Satan, they make an alliance, conquer Jerusalem, start conquering everything. Okay, 5 months later, which I believe is the time that it's going to take to melt Antarctica, that's when the 200 are released, because they're locked up in a separate spot. The Almighty had the 200 locked up, and then he had Apollyon locked up, and the demons were free to roam, but they were torturing Noah's children. So Noah pleaded with the Almighty to lock them up, and the Almighty was going to lock up all of them. But at this time, Satan was still a holy angel. He went to the Almighty and asked the Almighty for some of the demons to assist him in his job, which was bringing spirits of dead down to where they're stored until either until the judgment day. So the Almighty allowed 10% of the demons to be under Satan's control to help him in his work. The rest were locked up with Apollyon. So Apollyon and 90% of the demons are locked up in one spot. The 200 fallen ones are locked up in another spot. Okay, and this number is 200, not 199. So 5 months later, right here, sixth trumpet, 5 months later, the 200 are released, and they go out and destroy everything outside of the Middle East. Anything that survived the sixth seal and the first couple trumpets, anything human outside of that area, outside of the Middle East, which is their jurisdiction, they kill. Okay? So now, at this point in time, the only thing on planet Earth that is habitable will be the Middle East. Okay? And then at the end of the 1290 and the 1260, they set up the mark, which is the DNA of Apollyon. And because what they want is they want to make humans stronger for the war of the great day. They're trying to take New Jerusalem by force, is what they're trying to do. They want New Jerusalem. So, they forced the DNA of Apollyon on the humans. And this is what Daniel 2:43 is talking about. The iron mixed with the clay. Because the two legs of iron are not Rome, like everybody tries to say they are. They are the fallen ones and the Gog and his minions. So it's the 8 heads and the 10 horns. That's what the two legs are. Nothing to do with Rome. And then the feet with the iron mixed with clay is when they force humans with the DNA of Apollyon to make them hybrids. And then in Daniel 2:43 we see that they mingled with the seed of men, but it doesn't mix well. And we also see that in the first bowl of wrath, that they get these sores all over them. It's because it's not mixing well. And that's what I believe these alien abductions have been going on for all these years, and that they've been getting better and better, is they are working on the mark to make hybrids with the humans. Okay, so when the mark is set up, the first ones, the 144,000, go to Jerusalem, and they're the first one to refuse it, and they're killed. This ends the 1290 and the 1260. Okay, and it also begins the Great Tribulation. This 45 days is the Great Tribulation. Okay, the first tribulation is the fifth seal. The fifth seal martyrs is the first tribulation. That's why we see immediately after the tribulation of those days, the fifth seal is the sixth seal, which is when New Jerusalem comes through the wormhole. And the stars fall into the earth as the energy forcing the space debris in between the wormhole and earth to hit the earth. Okay? And the reason why every mountain and island move is because the energy of that wormhole is going to interrupt our rotation and our G-forces, and the crust is going to wobble, which is, the scripture says, to and fro like a drunkard, but it's wobbling on the liquid part underneath. Alright, so that's the first tribulation, the fifth seal. The second tribulation, the Great Tribulation, is only this 45 days after the mark is set up, which is when the beasts kill all who refuse it. First ones that refuse it are 144,000. They're killed. They lay in the street for 3 days, but then they're raptured up as the first part of the sacrifice, not first fruits. First fruits is a poor translation. It's actually the first part of the sacrifice. Okay? And then the new believers, who the 144,000 won, during their ministry for the 1260 days, their special mission. Now they seen the example set by the 144,000. Now they have to refuse the mark also, and then they get killed. And this is the Great Tribulation, and this 45 days is the time cut short, okay, for the sake of the 144,000. The time is only 45 days. And then this is Revelation 14, where all human flesh is separated. This is the final generation of flesh. Okay, there will be no human flesh after Revelation 14. There's no survivors like people try saying. This is it. They kill all who refuse the mark. So either you take the mark and live and are transformed into a hybrid, but then are doomed because you can no longer put on the garment of salvation after that point because you're not human. Or you refuse the mark and you're killed, but then you're raptured up in the final main harvest rapture, which is the great harvest, the tabernacle pilgrimage. And this is what it's talking about when the Messiah says that those who wish to keep their lives will lose it, and those who wish to lose their lives will gain it. Meaning, if you try to save your life, you're damned. But if you lose your life, then you're raptured up and you're saved. Okay, and then the 1335 ends here after the all are killed, and then this begins the time and a half a time, which is the final 3.5 years of Babylon the Great, which is the beast of the earth, the iron mixed with clay. Because after this point, Revelation 14, those who refuse the mark are killed and raptured up, as we see in verses 12 to 16. And then those who take the mark are gathered and thrown into the winepress, which the mark creates Babylon the Great. Right? Babylon the Great is created right here when the mark is set up, and they take the mark. Okay. And then at the end of the 2300 days is the war of the great day, when the Messiah comes down, kills everything, binds the 200 and Azazel, Apollyon, casts them into the burning fire, and that's when this is completed. That's when this is fulfilled. Because they are the transgression. Apollyon is considered the transgression. He's the first one to transgress. Alright? And the whole crime is ascribed to him. So there will be no sin after him, because he's been dealt with. Plus, we will be in our redeemed bodies. And that's why everlasting righteousness is brought in, because we're in our redeemed bodies at that point in time. The reconciliation for the iniquity is them being bound and cast into the burning fire forever. Right? And we see this all begins and with the consummation of judgment. The completion of the judgment starts right here. The great day of their wrath has come. The great day is when they're released to be dealt with. Okay. So, after the separation of human flesh at the mark of the beast, that's when Babylon Great is created, the beast of the earth, and they're gathered and thrown into the winepress. The winepress is the bowls. And this is when the bowls begin. And I think they occur in one day. All right. And then this is when he continues. The jurisdiction continues. So they have this final 3.5 years. It's the continuing of the jurisdiction. All right. And then when the new believers refuse the mark, that's the second part of the sacrifice. So the 144,000 are the first part, and the new believers are the second part of the sacrifice. Because they were here during the time of wrath, they had to sacrifice themselves. Because at that point in time, the enemy has jurisdiction. The Almighty's given jurisdiction to them for that final 7 years, kind of like a final meal for someone on death row. Same principle. Now, I believe the bowls happen in one day, and then they have the 3.5 years to gather to get ready for the war. And when the Messiah comes down, he's coming down to tread the winepress for the war of the great day. And as you know by scripture, he completely kills everything. It says in Revelation, this is why I say there is no survivors. Those people that try to act like, there's people hiding in a rock and stuff like that. Okay, so the beast was seized. So Apollyon was seized. With him, Samayaza and the 200. And these were thrown alive into the lake of fire. The rest were killed. Okay, and then so the rest were killed, and then also you take into the fact where that they kill all who refuse the mark. Okay, all means all, the rest means the rest. So there's no survivors because flesh cannot inherit the kingdom. So either you are in your redeemed body or you're dead. There's no survivors. Flesh cannot inherit the kingdom. And like the Almighty said, his spirit will only strive with flesh for 120 jubilees. Okay? So then, the Apollyon and the 200 get bound and thrown into the burning fire. Satan, Gog, and his minions get bound and locked up in the abyss because they weren't in prison yet. So now they get their turn in prison, and then they're locked up for 1,000 years. But everlasting righteousness has already been brought in because the main crime, because the Almighty puts all the crime on Azazel, the Apollyon, the antichrist. So that's already been dealt with. Everlasting righteousness has already been brought in. But Satan, Gog, and his minions are locked up for 1,000 years, then released. They gather up the demon spirits to come against the camp of the saints, and the Almighty rains fire down from New Jerusalem, because New Jerusalem is in near space at this point in time. And after he rains fire down, destroys them, then they get tossed into the burning fire, and then all is made clean. Evil has been cleansed from heaven and earth, because evil's cleansed at the war in heaven when Gog and his minions get tossed to earth. There's no longer evil in space. So I'm right after Revelation 6:14, right here. The sky was split apart like a scroll. Some versions say heaven, which is space. Okay. Heaven departed as a scroll. So space rolls up like a scroll, and every mountain and island are moved out of their places when this occurs, which I'm saying that this is a big, gigantic wormhole, and New Jerusalem comes through it, because it transports from the core of the sun, comes out in near space, and that energy is what interrupts our rotation and causes the crust to wobble. And then once it's here, it immediately, the Almighty immediately deals with evil in heaven, which is space, which is Gog and his minions, the devil and his minions at their headquarters in the moon. Completely obliterates it, tosses their ship into the Pacific. So at that point in time, heaven is already cleansed. So the only thing left to cleanse is the earth. And at the end of the 7 years, they cleanse it. But then, because Satan and his minions didn't go to prison yet, they get put in prison for 1,000 years. Then they're released. The Almighty rains down fire on them. They're destroyed. They get thrown into the burning fire. And then earth is cleansed. And then that's when New Jerusalem and the Almighty come down to tabernacle with us, because all is cleansed, made new. Right? And that's what this 7,000-year timeline is all about. Making all things clean, new, from the evil that was birthed in the second week, in the first year, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month. Okay? See, the city had no need for the sun or the moon to shine, for the glory of the Almighty and the Lamb. Okay? And the Messiah says, "Behold, I come quickly, my reward is with me, to give every man according as his work." Not whether or not you believe. Even the demons believe. It's according to your work. I am the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are they that do his commandments. Okay? The Spirit and the bride say, "Come." Let he that heareth say, "Come." Let him that be athirst come. Okay. Thought it was in 22. Okay, there it is. Alright. So it's 21. And he that sat upon the throne said, "Behold, I make all things new." clean. The cleansing process. He's dealing with evil. He cleans it out of heaven first, then he cleans it from the earth. Fresh. Behold, I make all things fresh, cleansed, new. Okay? Because there's no longer evil. It's all been dealt with after the 7,000-year cleansing process. And that's what this 7,000-year video is about, is the cleansing process. So with that, I leave you. Like I said, today is an extremely high watch. And this is the Jerusalem time. Right in here, I believe is as high as a watch as it gets, right in here. But then it could go anywhere from here to here. But I believe the highest watch is right here, which in America would be 2 hours from now, so around 1 p.m. So, if I missed the first Rapture, I'll be back and let you know. If not, I'll be doing my best in New Jerusalem to help you all out. And no matter what, the Almighty's grace is sufficient. And I pray that the will of YaHushuWaH, the Almighty, Kodesh Abba in New Jerusalem, that His will be done, His kingdom come, in the name of His only begotten Son, YaHushuWaH, Most High King and the Most High Priest, conqueror of evil.